Jonathan, and yes, change is expensive, right? We know that, and that's why we have all this methodology and all these things going around talking about change. How do we deal with change? Business wants change. They must be adaptable, agile, right? This is what we're fed. This is the kind of information. This is the kind of thing that we need to act upon. Well, change is definitely expensive. If I do something once and then I have to do it again and then do it again and then do it again, well, that's going to be more expensive than doing it once. The problem is, can we do it once and then it's always correct? And the answer to that is no. Things have to change. Change is expensive. So I've written a few things down. Let's go through what these things are and see if we can get a handle on change and have a bit of a perspective on what it means. Okay, so currently we are creating all kinds of solutions to deal with change. We should ensure our code can do the same. Change is expensive. Will this code change soon? Can we afford to not do it now? What is the cost now versus later? So these are the kinds of things that we're dealing with. I'm writing some code now. Is this going to change? Well, I'm not so sure, but it should work. I don't know. Does anyone know? Is this okay? I think it's okay. Current knowledge. Yeah, okay. Ship it. Right. Oh, okay. The user actually didn't want that. User wants something else. Who didn't tell us that that was the user story? Oh, well, okay, we know now. Let's do it. Right. Let's have a retrospective and say, well, how did we miss that? Oh, well, somebody didn't really ask the right questions. Well, let's have a checklist for the right questions next time and see if we can improve our user stories. Can you please elaborate a little bit more? And we can get to the bottom of that. And then it goes into a cycle. You write some more code, and then obviously you ship it again. And we're in this kind of change. And we're looking for change because we're saying, is that okay? Right? So we've got this A/B testing, perhaps, like, do you like the screen? Oh, you like that one? Okay. So now we've written two screens, we've written one screen, whatever the case may be. We've got one chosen, we then got it wrong. So we're always doing this change because we're worrying about feedback. And we're creating all kinds of solutions to deal with this. So we've got this idea of continuous deployment, continuous value, or increments. We've got micro commits all the way through to value, small pieces of value that we can deliver more frequently. And so when we're sitting down as a coder, we're saying, will this code change soon? Can we afford not to do it now? These are the questions. Like, I know that it needs to be X. Like, it's not really part of the user story, but it's gonna be. Like, it probably will be. Oh, well, I'll just do this. Now, if I've done TDD, I might do a test and then do that. Well, if it comes back and I haven't done what I thought it would do, then I've got change. I have to refactor from state A to state B. And change is expensive because, and more expensive and more expensive if there are many, many states of change. So if I go state A to B to C to D, every little time it's a little bit more expensive. Even if you deploy all kinds of tooling around that and say, well, now it's easier because you've got a test that went green that shows that your change didn't break anything. Oh, you're quicker now, right? Even if you introduce that, there's an automated suite of tests, all different types. Now you can run that and get feedback, and you can concentrate on how quickly that runs. Oh, it's 10 minutes. Oh, that's too long. Now it's 6 minutes. Okay, that's too long. And you can do all of that to try and speed up your regression and what the state A to be, the time that it would take, therefore the cost. But actually, is it a case of I could have asked the right question and I could have deducted 2 or 3 steps? A to D could have been the transition, and therefore I didn't have to do those micro things in the middle, manage those micro things, get additional stories for those things, or something to that nature. Maybe I can reduce that. The lay of the land, though, is that we are actually doing things in a micro way. We're actually reducing from a coarse grained all the way down to fine grained. So everything is getting shorter and smaller. Frequent updates, that frequency is reducing and reducing. Okay. Now, the thing is, you should always assume that change will cost more later than today. Even if it's just an economic thing, my salary will be higher next year than this year. The number of people on the team might be greater. The code surrounding that area will be more filled in. So now the effect is greater. We could have more tests, and one of those tests could be coupled, causing a problem and gives us a delay on making that change. So whatever it might be, you must always assume that delaying something for later is just going to cost more, right? It's going to be that technical debt metaphor, that you've got that gap and now it's going to cost. And the longer you leave that into your current code base and the further that develops and evolves, you are going to pay greater sums when you need to now move to the new understanding. And so you cannot remove technical debt from an actively evolving software development project. And that's true. You can't actually remove it. You never will. You will always have a state of A and then B. And A and B can move quite quickly. The question there should be asked, how does that change occur? Right? Is it us saying, oh, we must have it? Or is it really a user saying, I must have it? And that can be a huge difference there. And also, does it satisfy our product, our vision, all those kinds of things? Do I need to be adaptable in a monthly sort of period or a weekly period? Could I just be adaptable if it took a month or two? Like, is that an acceptable agility feel? Like, maybe you don't have to be like a worm. You could be a little bit less subtle or supple than that, right? The objective is to reduce and minimize technical debt. Now remember, technical debt is that gap and I'm using that as partially why there is change. So change and technical debt go very similarly, right? So they hand in hand in many respects. TDD, right? So test-driven development. Let's have a look at that, right? I just want to talk about that briefly, just to look at it in a change sort of pair of glasses, right? So TDD strives to allow you to deal with change more quickly. That is what they say. But it delivers this by adding more tooling, thinking, and coding. Okay, so what do I mean by that? Well, you have to have some kind of tool, whether it's NUnit or something similar. You have to have a tool, you have to have automation, and those tools get upgraded. And those people developing that, right, the team, they're also in this, let's say, agile mindset to deliver more value quickly and get an update to you as soon as possible and add a feature and all of that. So they're thinking change and delivering it to you, and you've got the tooling, so therefore your dependency on that is sound and has to be migrated to all the versions. If they do something that impacts you minimally or greatly, you have to deal with that. And so therefore, just by writing test code, you've got more code, more to manage, more in your repo. You've also got tooling to enable that, to run it, to have the green and red flags, right? You need that tooling. That is being upgraded. So immediately, TDD is striving to allow you to deal with change more quickly, but it delivers this by adding more tooling, thinking, and coding. So you've got to think and design that test first and so on. So the question is, does it reduce more than it adds? I'm not convinced. Most people would say that TDD actually helps you deal with change and it has a positive outcome. I'm not convinced. I think that it is very likely to add a lot of weight and add more change. But I don't think it's the cause. I think the agile movement in itself, maybe not the agile movement, but the extreme side of agile is perhaps the cause of this kind of micro change. And TDD is, in a sense, trying to deal with that. But it does create an environment where change just becomes more and more. So TDD plus Agile and this micro mentality. And that, I would imagine, is something that you could or could not do in Agile. You could do it monthly or weekly. It's not prescribing that. So, maybe it's just us becoming more and more obsessed with this micro world. And so TDD and Agile micro mentality definitely increases change, and therefore we need TDD. And you can see that that's another self-fulfilling prophecy. And so what if you did not induce as much change? So what if you got feedback a little less, right? So instead of 10 feedbacks per deployment, you got 5. You didn't enact on all 5, you only acted on 2. What if you released every fortnight instead of weekly? What if you did it every month instead of fortnightly, right? And what if you reduced that change? What if you didn't induce change? You didn't add TDD or more tests or more tooling. You reduced dependencies. You deleted features. You removed a feature because it wasn't that used. You removed lines of code. You removed tests. And what if you did not induce as much change into your project and your product? And what if you reduced change completely? Just the act of not accepting that change is inevitable and I'm just going to do it. So what if that was our driver, right? So one technique might be this closed for modification, open to extension, and that can reduce change. You can say, look, I've built a framework, there it sits, now you build specializations on top. That sort of layer is not something I'm going to change right now. And therefore, I've done tests already, I've thrown them away because I don't need them. That's quite solid, right? We don't even need them. I mean, we don't even run them. I mean, we can leave them there, but we run them once in a while. We don't even change that data layer and that framework and things like that. And if that's the case, if we don't change something, then the environment is still the same. And so that actually means that we are stopping change. And I think this is a very good thing. This is something we should explore more. We've got agility saying, look, don't design up front. You don't have all the answers. Let's get feedback. And then you have more layers on that, which is when we get feedback, we're going to implement those changes. Then we have another degree, which is we need to commit micro everything. So we need little bits of feedback on little bits of work, on little bits of change, and we need to commit very, very often. And that kind of agility is perhaps somewhere which is too far for the vast majority of businesses. So lastly, just to point out this in a bit of a conclusion, I guess, is software is complicated, change is expensive, and don't induce change. This really should be just like software is complicated, don't make it more complex. Same thing applies. Change is expensive, don't induce change. Same kind of logic, right? We don't need to do that. Another angle to this is that everything changes at a different rate. So these things where the entire code base is treated with the same paintbrush, like in test-driven development where there's code coverage and we're going to cover everything, and every single thing is testability oriented. Every single thing can be tested. Everything can be checked against the test and fail if it's changed and so on. That is perhaps not the right way to approach this because everything changes at a different rate. If you're testing everything, you're testing something that changes very frequently, you're also changing something that doesn't change frequently. So you're going to lose on all the places that doesn't change frequently. And if your design and your designs, your code, your extension, the way that you've structured your code and your architecture is designed in extensibility sort of ways, using design patterns like Abstract Factory and Framework, Hollywood Principles, things like that, then you can design something that deals with change when it does. And do you need as many tests for that? And so we've got to be very careful not to paint the entire code base with the same brush. What we want is to be specific about what technique. Maybe test-driven development is very good for this library, that changes very often, right? So we want to be specific about where we use a methodology and in relation to that change rate. And so now we come to cohesion. So temporal cohesion is where we can group things together that have a temporal quality, that the change rate is the same or similar, very connected. This will change, therefore this will change, let's put it together. This, depends on that, that will change. Or the time frame between this action and this action, let's draw a line and separate it, create a queue. So however you think about temporal cohesion or procedural cohesion and those sorts of things, you can look at the change rate on a domain object or a business rule, and you can apply a different methodology to that type of code. Applying TDD across the board, even to things that do not change frequently, is perhaps overkill.